Ring-a-ling, ring-a-ling, hear them ring, soon it will be Christmas Day.
Good morning. My name's Norm Horofker, and I'm proud to be the minister of this congregation, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax. Welcome to our Boxing Day service. Boxing Day is a holdover from Victorian times, when wealthy families would give their servants the day off and a box of gifts to share after Christmas. And our service today will take us back to Victorian times. Jessica Friesen is our music director. Marie-Claude Leroux is our director of religious exploration. And this morning, John Piccolo is our volunteer technical director. If you're not already receiving notifications from our church and you'd like to receive updates on our activities and services, please send an email to minister@uuch.ca. You have no doubt realized by now that the Omicron variant has shut down our in-person services for the time being, and I'm coming to you from my home. I'm self-isolating following a notification from my dentist that I might have been exposed during a recent dental visit, but I'm fine, and I managed to get, with the help of a congruent, to get a rapid test that came back negative. But I'm still observing recommended protocols. Marie-Claude, our Director of Religious Exploration, is off this morning. Jessica Friesen, our Music Director, is joining us from her time with family in Manitoba this morning. I'm very happy that Jessica is able to join the service and be with us. She graciously recorded the music that we'll be sharing in this service before she left for Manitoba. Thankfully, our technology, I think, has worked. And so, we get to test it now. Settle back, relax, while Jessica presents our prelude, a melancholy reflection on the day just past.
Where are you, Christmas? Why can't I find you? Why have you gone away? Where is the laughter you used to bring me? Why can't I hear music playing? Where are you, Christmas? Do you remember the one you used to know? I'm not the same one. See what the time's done. Is that why you have let me go? I feel you, Christmas. I know I found you. You never fade away. The joy of Christmas stays here inside us, fills each and every heart with love. My world is changing, we're rearranging. Does that mean Christmas changes too?
Thank you, Jessica, for that gift. It was beautiful. Before the service begins, I have a few announcements this morning. First, a report that the Christmas Hamper Program, in cooperation with the Canadian Mental Health Association, was another success this year. Thanks to the generosity of our congregation and the work of the Saunier family, a truckload of Christmas hampers were assembled with love and delivered to individuals who are socially isolated due to mental health issues. We have a picture of Kyla and Tristan and Destiny and Jason and Abby and the hampers. And a second slide with pictures taken by Marg at the Canadian Mental Health Association as the hampers were packed for delivery. Marg sent us this message. One picture from the night we picked them up, and then the next day in front of 2020 Cottage in our office before deliveries were made. Our Building Bridges program members who received the gift bags wanted to thank everyone from your church who made the gifts happen again this year. We are so grateful. Merry Christmas, Marg. And thanks to all those in the congregation who contributed funds to make this possible, and to Marie-Claude and the Saunier families who did all the shopping and packing and logistics work. Thank you all. Before the service begins, I have a few additional announcements. The order of service was sent out over UU Info late Saturday, and it contains some detail on the following. As I mentioned earlier, we've decided that, with regret, that it would be best not to have congregation members in attendance at the church for the time being. As you're all aware, it's a rapidly changing situation, so you'll just have to watch UU Info for updates for when you will be invited back into the sanctuary. There are no team meetings this week, which is appropriate. I think we're all taking a break from all the business of church, hopefully to relax and maybe do some meditation on the year just past and the year to come. And here's the last announcement about opportunities in relation to year end. Your building team has been working diligently on design and to arrange construction of a new deck to replace the currently deteriorating structure with something bigger, better, and fully accessible. We have received a grant of $13,000 from the Community Access Program. We need to raise an additional $20,000 in addition to money from our Building Reserve Fund. The official fundraising kickoff will be in the new year, but if you'd like to take advantage of the year-end tax deductions, if you have that opportunity, now would be a good time to do that. So if you'd like to make a contribution before the end of the year for the capital fundraising for the new deck, please contact Marilyn Chenier, our treasurer, at treasurer@uuch.ca. And now, I'm hoping Vitska Gradstein is with us and ready to present the land and climate acknowledgements.
Thank you, Norm, and happy Boxing Day for all of you and everybody else that still needed to go put boxes away or whatever. I don't know. Oh, I have to unmute myself. Okay. Am I now speaking?
You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Norm, and happy Boxing Day to everybody. Now, I found out recently that the Indian agent is still around, and so I'm wondering if the Indian agent this year has allowed the Indigenous people of Canada to celebrate either Christmas or Boxing Day. Now, Christmas is, of course, the Christian tradition, and I'm sure that that is part of their mandate, Indian agents being what they are. And but Boxing Day is based on so many other indigenous customs and rules and regulations from other countries that immigrated at one time to Canada and to the United States. And so, as I was thinking of that, I was wondering if a tradition like that, Boxing Day, and of course it was the night before Christmas, which is treated in Canada, I found as Holy Scripture. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring. There it is. There's a slide. That's good. And so I thought that maybe the Indian agent would have something to say about that. But the Indian agent, I don't know what he said. He's still around. Oh, I have to turn my Christmas tree on too. I have to apologize because like 5 seconds ago I was still being dressed by my care worker who is now leaving. Can you tell them goodbye? Okay, no, then she didn't want to. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are they clean? Are they clean? Did you clean them?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. My glasses are clean. I'm putting them on. Then I can read what I wrote before. What I wrote before, I wrote 2 days ago. No, yesterday. And I changed it last night, and I added it again in my bed. So then I lost what I had on my phone because of all kinds of troubles with my computers and phones. So I will have to improvise. I know what I wrote though, because I wrote about Boxing Day and I wrote about the Indian agent being still around. It's amazing that there is still an Indian agent and that there is still a Department of Indian Affairs of its equivalent, or its equivalent. That is something that will have to stay with us, because the indigenous people and their governing is done federally, and all the immigrants like you and I, that their governments are provincial. And I don't know if it will ever be possible for the Canadian politics to make indigenous people truly equal to immigrated people. So even though I thought it was mostly, even though I thought that we should, by adapting to the Indian thoughts and Indian culture and now I should say indigenous culture and their way of living would be more important than adapting to the Christian nature and way of living that we have here, that we have brought to Canada, and eventually everybody would be equal. But apparently, because of the grown government in place, we are still having to deal with an Indian agent and Indian reserves and Indian Department of Indian Affairs, which is of course something called now differently. We all know, we have all learned, and we are learning very rapidly about the incredible misery and abuse and the harassment and bullying that has taken place by this Indian agent and this Department of Indian Affairs. However, things have changed. The last big change was in 2002. That was the year of 5 big changes. And but we are all thinking that these Indians or these indigenous people, all that we can do is give them our charitable donations and give them as much money as they want. Now the government does that too. They give them a lot of money. Actually, they in the past and in the past years and centuries by now, they have given them a lot of money in order to compensate for this incredibly abuse that they have caused to the first Indians and then indigenous people. What the people then at that time really needed was somebody who would help them access that money. I remember watching a movie actually in the church together with Norm, and one of the questions from that was asked was, why is he saying that if there's money we go after it? That was only a few years ago, like 20 or something. 10. How long have you been here, Norm? and but we were all a little bit shocked by that remark too. But that was the problem. The problem was that it get a lot of money, and the government has been generous left and right, and not generous enough, we think, and we all think probably, and because we feel so terribly guilty. But they got the money, but they only got it in where did it go? And once it was there, who was making sure it was used for what it was meant to be? And they had nobody. But now we are in a stage where the young people have grown up, and they've gone to, not all the young people, not all the young Westerners have gone to become successful businessmen. There are very few of us that became very successful businessmen. But in the First Nations, every First Nation, I would guess, there are successful businessmen. And those successful businessmen and women do successful business work. And so like in Nova Scotia, they have bought things like Clearwater Lobster, then realizing that when you own Clearwater Lobster, you have to do with the Inuit up north, to which the Clearwater had the rights for fishing, and they have had a struggle with them forever. And how are these Mi'kmaq owners how are they going to deal with that? That is still up in the air. And in Bear River, I learned that they are now owning a large part of the Digby Pines, and the resort there. And what are they going to do with that? So, I find it interesting that we still think of indigenous people as a charity. They don't like to be a charity. It is terrible to be a charity. You have to be grateful, and you are grateful. I know about that. I am disabled and have no income, so I take all the charity I can get. But an official charity, I am not. And even like that. Anyway, I am distracting. I'm going all over the place. The end of my story was, I think I have it here. Oh no. Okay. Originally, the Indian Act was to make the Indian people into good British citizens. I now think we should all become good Canadians, in so that we can follow the directions that the indigenous people give us in the fields of environmental protection. And I was going to talk in this thing that I wrote down, I have a little bit more about that. For instance, that in the West, with the problems with the West, this was from Laura Lynch on the CBC, the indigenous people there have for years and years and years and years themselves done prophylactic, that's the wrong word here, but burning of the forests in the fall, so that the in the spring, so that the dead wood that was left after the winter was burned before it would be a target for the big forest fires in the summer.
Thank you, Wietske.
Huge pollution, but that is climate change, and I would like to talk about the indigenous people. And I've gone way too long, I think, because I did not time this because I'm improvising.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, and thank you for listening.
So I'm lighting our chalice today from my home, following these words. We light our chalice today from my home for all of our fellow travelers in this life, that we may learn from one another and from the stories that we tell and that we retell. May this holiday season, with its timeless stories, bring lightness where there is heaviness, joy where there is sorrow. And now, again, we have a gift pre-recorded by Jessica.
You should all know this. City sidewalks, busy sidewalks, dressed in holiday style. In the air, there's a feeling of Christmas. Children laughing, people passing, meeting smile after smile, and on every street corner you'll hear. Okay, ready? Silver bells, silver bells, silver bells, silver bells. Soon da 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 da. Ring-a-ling, ring-a-ling, ring-a-ling. Hear them ring, hear them ring. Soon it will be Christmas Day. Help me along. String of street lights, even stoplights, blink with bright red and green as the shoppers rush home with their treasures. Hear the snow crunch, see the kids bunch. This is Santa's big scene. And above all this bustle, you'll hear silver bells, silver bells, silver bells, silver bells. Soon, what is the words? It's Christmas time in the city. One more time. Ring-a-ling, ring-a-ling. Hear them ring, hear them ring. Soon it will be Christmas Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Mary Claude and I searched for an appropriate story for the time for children of all ages, and we settled on some excerpts from the 1992 movie, The Muppets Christmas Carol. And if you don't like the Muppets, all I can say is, bah humbug. Now we'll take our special time to reflect on our joys and sorrows. It is a sacred time in our service. It's a time that we set apart to honor the many joys and the many sorrows that you in the congregation are living, and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. Today I'm doing this service from home, and I don't have the requisite materials for lighting candles for joys and sorrows. But that won't stop us from honoring your joys and sorrows this morning. This morning, for anyone watching on Zoom who would like to share a memory or an event or honor an individual, I invite you to use that chat function to send a request to everyone or to me over chat. And we'll hold your sharing amongst us this morning, but without candles. This morning, I start by acknowledging that there are those among us and in our thoughts who are struggling mentally, physically, or financially, or emotionally. This is the hard part of living in community at a time when we are physically separated. I hope you can find ways to reach out if you need help, reach out to me or to our caring committee. I'd also like to light one candle for all the joys that are here with us today, this Boxing Day right after Christmas. The big joys that come along only infrequently, like Christmas, and the little joys that we're blessed with every day if we're able to see them. Each week I invite anyone who would like a candle lit to email me with details. And this morning I want to begin by holding up the family of Lemarian Kane, the 8-year-old boy who was shot and killed in a brazen shooting in Dartmouth earlier this week. As our congregation and Unitarian Universalists across the continent grapple with the need to dismantle racism, there should be no doubt that this senseless killing is the result of decades of racism that are ingrained in our society. As your minister, I hardly know where to begin, but I know that we must be developing and strengthening our relationships that cross racial and socioeconomic barriers. On behalf of our congregation, I have reached out to ministerial colleagues in North Preston, and I hope that our congregations will find a way to work together, building relationships in the new year. I received this email from Pat Griffin-Hody, who's driving back from Ontario this morning. My beautiful orange fluffy cat Angus died in the Cat Inn fire in Ferguson's Cove on Sunday night. Perhaps you heard about that on the news. If that wasn't tragedy enough, I found out today that someone broke into my house while I was away and trashed it in the wee hours this morning. A pipe was broken downstairs and the apartment is under an inch of water. The police have turned the water off. Max, that's Pam's son, wasn't home. He went to Ottawa for Christmas. Anyway, for Angus and my dealings with my house, police, insurance, etc., please remember, I have reached out to Pam to offer help as needed. And if there's anything we can do, you'll hear more on UU Info. Now, this morning, I want to celebrate joys as well. And we're all happy for Jessica, our music director, who's with family in Manitoba for the holidays. She's been looking forward to that for some time. So for you, Jessica, a virtual candle. And I heard from Scott Wood, who recently underwent eye surgery and I think has joined the service this morning. Scott wrote, "The surgery went well according to my doctor, and as I experienced the whole procedure. However, my eye looked swollen and sore like I'd been in a street brawl." Now, that was a week ago. In order for everything to heal properly, I'm consigned for the next 7 days, keeping my head facing down, practicing mindfulness while carefully studying the floors. Now, if there's anyone at home that would like to share a joy or a sorrow as part of the service, I'll monitor the chat function and return again after our reflective hymn. And now Jessica will lead us in our reflective hymn, Let Christmas Come.
Let's sing Let Christmas Come, number 224. Let Christmas come, its story told, when days are short and winds are cold. Let Christmas come, its lovely song, when evening soon and night is long. Let Christmas come, its great star glow on quiet city parks of snow. Let Christmas come, its stable gleam, love born again, the truth of dream.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so may the joys and sorrows, both those acknowledged here this morning and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the interdependent fabric of community. And now Margaret has a reading for us, imagining an encounter between Ebenezer Scrooge and a clinical psychologist.
Does my Uncle Scrooge need help? A psychological evaluation of Ebenezer Scrooge. Imagine the following. You have a very crabby and very wealthy uncle. One day, he says he saw ghosts. Not one ghost, but 3 ghosts. Now he's a changed man. What would you do? You might very well take your uncle to a psychologist. This psychological analysis was done in November of 2005 by Karen Eveland, a student at Texas A&M University, Kingsville, for an abnormal psychology class. Psychological evaluation. Date, January 15th, 1844. Patient, Ebenezer Scrooge. Personal data. Ebenezer Scrooge is an approximately 50-year-old Caucasian male. He is single and has never been married. Mr. Scrooge lives alone. He owns his own business. Mr. Scrooge's closest living relative is his nephew, Fred. Presenting problems. Mr. Scrooge states that he has no complaints. However, he has agreed to meet today in order to satisfy the concerns of his nephew, Fred. Fred states that he is concerned about Mr. Scrooge's mental state. He claims Mr. Scrooge has been unusually active and emotional, and that he has been giving away his money in large sums. At this time, Fred is requesting that Mr. Scrooge be evaluated for mental competency to determine if he is in need of a guardian. History. Mr. Scrooge and his nephew participated in providing details about Mr. Scrooge's life history. Mr. Scrooge reports that he spent most of his childhood in boarding school. He was often isolated, forgotten by his family, felt and still believes that his father did not care much for him. He states the only relative that paid attention to him was his sister, Fan, who has now deceased. Mr. Scrooge states that he had few close friends during his childhood. During young adulthood, Mr. Scrooge was engaged to be married. However, when his bride-to-be expressed concerns about his obsession with getting ahead, the wedding was called off. He does state that he had one friend, Jacob Marley, who was also his business partner. Jacob Marley is now deceased, and Mr. Scrooge reports having no other close friends, until very recently. Fred states that in the past he has attempted to visit Mr. Scrooge frequently, but that he generally found him inhospitable. Further, Fred states that the last 7 years or so, Mr. Scrooge has worked late on a daily basis, isolating and depriving himself of his sole employee of even adequate heating at his place of business. Approximately 2 weeks ago, on Christmas Eve, Mr. Scrooge claims that he was visited by his deceased friend, Mr. Marley, as well as 3 other spirits. Mr. Scrooge states that initially he thought his vision of Mr. Marley was a hallucination brought on by indigestion. However, he now believes the event to have been real. He states that Mr. Marley warned him about being punished in the afterlife and told him to change his ways before it was too late. Mr. Scrooge states that after Mr. Marley departed, he saw 3 other spirits who transported him through time and space to view Christmases in the past, present, and future. He says 2 of the spirits actually spoke with him and warned him about living his life selfishly. Mr. Scrooge says that the last spirit did not speak, but did take him to visit his own grave. Mr. Scrooge states that upon awakening Christmas morning and finding he was still alive, he determined to change his ways. He says that his sudden generosity is a result of this determination. He also claims that he is happier than he has ever been in his life and that each new day brings him more joy. Mr. Scrooge states that he has never used any drugs and that he drinks alcoholic beverages rarely. Fred confirms this information. Current status. Mr. Scrooge appears to be coherent. He is able to identify place, time, and people. He reports no other delusions or hallucinations. Diagnostic considerations. Initial impressions of Mr. Scrooge's symptoms indicate a possibility of bipolar disorder. These symptoms include sudden onset of extreme mood fluctuations, racing thoughts, increased social activity, and a decreased need for sleep. However, these symptoms are balanced with intermittent periods of deep thought and reflection occurring several times within the same day. He also reports no symptoms of depression. Therefore, he does not meet the criteria for bipolar, hypomania, or cyclothymia. Due to the sudden onset of Mr. Scrooge's psychotic-like symptoms, hallucinations and delusions, and the extremely short duration of these symptoms, one night, Mr. Scrooge does not meet criteria for schizophrenia or schizophreniform. Although Mr. Scrooge's thinking is somewhat symptomatic of delusional thinking, in that he maintains that the hallucinations he experienced on Christmas Eve were real, he otherwise displays no other indications of irrational thought. Mr. Scrooge appears to have suffered from brief psychotic disorder without marked stressors. The hallucinations and delusions he experienced 2 weeks ago evidence this. The fact that he maintains the reality of the events does not necessarily indicate deluded thinking, since the trauma from experiencing delusions and hallucinations of the magnitude reported by Mr. Scrooge could be enough to convince him of their reality. It is common for people to believe such hallucinations are real, when the only alternative explanation is for them to accept that they are temporarily psychotic. It is quite possible that Mr. Scrooge did suffer from some type of food poisoning, which in turn caused him to hallucinate. However, after this much time has elapsed, it would be very difficult to investigate this hypothesis. It seems more likely that Mr. Scrooge experienced a brief psychotic episode. Although undiagnosed, Mr. Scrooge appears to have suffered from obsessive-compulsive personality disorder in the past, as evidenced by his hoarding money and extreme work history. People who suffer from personality disorders are more at risk to experience a brief psychotic disorder than the general population. It is impossible to diagnose Mr. Scrooge with this disorder, however, since he has no current symptoms. As for Mr. Scrooge's current mental state, he appears to be competent. Although he is giving away large sums of his money and is very emotional, he is able to mentally assess the risks of his behavior. Mr. Scrooge does not appear to be a danger to himself or others. Notes. Axis 1. Clinical disorders. Brief psychotic episode, December 24th, 1843. Axis 2. Personality disorders. Possible history of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Axis 3. General medical condition, deferred. Axis 4. Psychosocial and environmental problems. Stress related to holidays, lack of friends and family support system, and what appears to have been a brief psychotic episode.
Thank you, Margaret. That was a clinical analysis of the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. It shows us how we can rationalize ourselves out of most situations. The Reverend John Barris Johnson, retired from ministry from this church, used to say, it's all about stories. And that's especially so at this time of year. This morning, my reflection is based on that story of Ebenezer Scrooge, as told in the novella A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. If Margaret's reading wasn't sufficient, I'm still making the assumption that you're familiar with the broad outlines of the story. And if not, I'm recommending the Muppet version movie. Ebenezer Scrooge has one evening of psychotic-like delusions and hallucinations, an experience that changes his life forever. Of course, we're all too wise today in our knowledge of mental health to have the course of our life changed by what could easily be treated with appropriate medication. What a pity. Scott Peck, one of my go-to authors, psychiatrist and philosopher, has said that anyone attempting to grow spiritually will reach a point where they need outside help. He was thinking of psychologists or psychiatrists, not apparitions in the middle of the night. But psychologists do much the same as Scrooge's ghosts. They talk about our past, what has shaped us. They talk about our present, what issues we're dealing with today. And they talk about our future. What do we really want from life? Well, back to Ebenezer. The story of Ebenezer Scrooge deserves analysis and retelling in Unitarian Universalist churches each year. UU's lay proud claim to Charles Dickens as a Unitarian. Truth is, that claim is based on some sketchy and anecdotal information. Charles Dickens did attend a Unitarian church with his family for a short time, and he was close friends with the minister at that congregation. But that's all we really know. Dickens certainly subscribed to ideas that were Unitarian. In particular, he had no use for discussions of creed and dogma that divided his fellow Christians. He wrote a retelling of the story of the life of Jesus that was intended just for his children, and it was never to be published. In fact, it finally was published in 1934, and I have a Canadian first edition of the book here, published by Musson Book Company in 1934. You can find them online for about $20 if you have any kind of interest. The story includes all the miracles that you would expect in a 19th century Christian recounting of the Gospels, but it ends with this paragraph. Remember, he's writing to his children. Remember, it is Christianity to do good always, even to those who do evil to us. And here the words "to do good" are in capital letters. It continues, it is Christianity to love your neighbor as yourself, and to do to all men as we would have them do to us. It is Christianity to be gentle, merciful, and forgiving, and to keep those qualities quiet in our hearts and never make a boast of them, or of our prayers, or of our love of God, but always to show that we love him humbly, trying to do the right in everything. If we do this and remember the life and lessons of our Lord and try to act upon them, we may confidently hope that God will forgive us our sins and mistakes and enable us to live and to die in peace. Here ends the quote. I love the way that ends, the way the book ends. No mention here of heaven or hell, just a hope to live and to die in peace. Whatever religious affiliation Unitarians associate with him, it was his social justice sensibilities that came from personal experience in Victorian England that connect with Unitarian values. Dickens was born to a middle-class family, but his father ended up in a debtor's prison when young Charles was 12 years old. Young Charles Dickens was forced to leave school to go to work in a shoeblacking factory under very depressing conditions. That change in circumstance gave him what his biographer Michael Slatter described as a deep personal and social outrage, which heavily influenced his writing and his outlook. He wrote A Christmas Carol with the express realization that the most effective way for him to reach the broadest segment of population with his social concerns about poverty and injustice was to write a deeply felt Christmas narrative rather than issuing pamphlets or speaking publicly or engaging in politics. Today, we see that story as a quaint tale about a miser in a long ago time who is transformed in one night into a generous, compassionate person. But Dickens' message was presented at a time when the worst offenses of the Industrial Revolution were manifest in England. Child labor, exploitation of all forms of labor, no trade unions, no legislation to protect the poor from the excesses of unfettered capitalism. Today we read the story of the conversion of Ebenezer Scrooge and get a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, like the Muppet movie. But the story was not intended to generate such feelings. The story was intended to draw attention to the injustices of the time, and it did so in a compelling way. The Illustrated London News at the time described how the story's impressive eloquence, its unfettered lightness of heart, its playful and sparkling humor, its gentle spirit of humanity all put the reader in good humor with ourselves, with each other, with the season, and with the author. And using this approach, it changed hearts and minds, as reported in this excerpt from Wikipedia, which reads, "The largest impact of A Christmas Carol was the influence felt by individual readers. In early 1844, the Gentleman's Magazine attributed a rise of charitable giving in Britain to Dickens' novella. In 1874, Robert Louis Stevenson, after reading Dickinson's Christmas books, vowed to give generously to those in need. In 1867, one American businessman was so moved by attending a reading that he closed his factory on Christmas Day and sent every employee a turkey. While in the early years of the 20th century, Maud of Wales, the Queen of Norway, sent gifts to London's crippled children, signed "With Tiny Tim's Love." On the novella, the author G.K. Chesterton wrote, "The beauty and blessing of the story lie in the great furnace of real happiness that glows through Scrooge and everything around him. Whether Christmas visions would or would not convert Scrooge, they convert us." The story of Ebenezer Scrooge was one factor in a societal change that would eventually do away with the poorhouses, child labor, etc., and would open the door to socialized medicine. We can all engage in a little self-analysis using Ebenezer Scrooge as a role model. The Ghost of Christmas Past is a lesson on reflection and how it can help us to increase our awareness of our habits and our actions. By looking back on his life, Scrooge sees clearly that over time his focus was on money, became more important to him than his love of other people. He sees the negative impact of these choices that had and the effect they had on himself and on others. There are lessons for all of us in reflection on Christmas past, the choices we have made, the roads not taken, the lessons learned, the lessons we have yet to learn from, the effect that our childhood had on shaping our character. The Ghost of Christmas Present teaches a lesson of the importance of listening to increase our awareness of the realities of the world around us. Today, we have no problem seeing Scrooge, the role of Scrooge, played in the inequities of his day. But what of our own culpability in today's injustices? Racism, child poverty, homelessness, ecological destruction, and climate change. Are we listening to the Ghost of Christmas Present? Scrooge had been indifferent to the lives of those around him, but as this second spirit warns him, beware of ignorance most of all. His eyes are open to both the struggles and the joy of the people around him. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come teaches a lesson in how we can have an impact, whether intended or not, on the future. For Scrooge, he sees a potential future in which he can draw a clear line from his past and his present, and it's not an appealing outlook. For all of us, our future is still unwritten. We have the opportunity to reflect on our past, to understand more about the present, and to plot a new way forward. What applies to the individual here also applies to societies and organizations. The Ghost of Christmas Past might show us the roots of racism today in slavery. the roots of cultural genocide in colonialism, the roots of environmental degradation in the unfettered harvesting of resources. I love the song by Gordon Lightfoot, the Canadian Railroad Trilogy. Back in my youth, in Christmas past, I saw it as an inspirational song. But today I cringe at lines like these from the song. Bring in the workers and bring up the rails. We got to lay down track and tear up the trails. Open her heart, let the lifeblood flow. We got to get on our way because we're moving too slow. We can draw a line from Christmas past to Christmas present and to Christmas future. But the future isn't carved in stone, like the names that Scrooge saw on the tombstone shown to him by his last specter. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at his robe, hear me, I'm not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I'm past all hope? For the first time, the hand of the Spirit appeared to shake. Good Spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart. I'll try to keep it every year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Our congregation, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax, has a past and a present and a future. The ghost of Christmas past would, I think, point to the fervor of the early Universalists, filled with the excitement of the potential of a religion freed from dogma and teaching the power of love. The spirit of the present would see us holding on to a world where our message of building bridges between people of different belief systems is so badly needed. Holding on in a world of polarization, of racism, of neglect of those with mental issues, a world where child poverty robs many of their birthright to a healthy and happy future. Holding on to a world where we are destroying the very systems that sustain our lives. Holding on in a world where our youth and our young adults find us irrelevant. And what image might the ghost of Christmas yet to come have to show us? What will this congregation look like in 10, 20, or 50 years if we were visited by that spirit, the ghost of Christmas yet to come? What would that spirit show us? That's the question before us. That, my friends, depends on us. And it depends on the story that we are writing as a congregation. May we wake up to our potential, as did Ebenezer Scrooge. May it be so, and amen. And now, I have the happy ending that you've been waiting for. This is the last service of the calendar year. It's an excellent time to make a special financial gift to support our congregation if you'd like to get a tax deduction for 2021 to boot. If you'd like to do so, here's the needed information. And now, Jessica, once again, through the magic of recorded video, will present our closing hymn.
We're gonna sit at the welcome Gonna sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people around that table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. No fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. No fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days.
And now we come to the end of our service. Time to extinguish the chalice. With these words, may the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to be haunt you all in a good way. So thank you all who attended the service today here in the sanctuary by Zoom or by YouTube. I'll say goodbye to those who joined us on YouTube now as we end our live streaming. For those who joined by Zoom in a few minutes, I will be returning. You'll be able to share joys or sorrows, followed by our virtual coffee hour. Thank you once again. The streaming service will now end.
Ring-a-ling.